Hey, everybody. Welcome to another special edition of Let's Talk Teens with Dr. Kela. I am your host, Dr. Kela, board-certified family practitioner, speaker, and award-winning author of Nia and the Numbers Game, A Teenager's Guide to Education, Relationships, and Sex. Today, I'm going to be interviewed by Sneha of Mindfully Yours. Some of you may remember that I interviewed another young lady named Anaga Rajesh from the same organization several months ago. Today, we're going to continue the conversation about mental health. Sneha, you're up.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am the Director of Operations and Outreach at YoursMindfully, and this will be a discussion about relationships and how young people and parents can have a safe space for them to have a conversation about it. Right? Yeah. So, Dr. Kela, my first question to you is, from your experience, what are the most common problems young people face when discussing relationships, sex, and emotions with their parents?
I think the biggest issues that I've come across is young people just feeling embarrassed or intimidated to approach their parents with these questions. Now, interestingly enough, children actually want to get these answers from their parents, but at the same time, they're afraid to get those answers from their parents by initiating the conversation in the first place. So it's a bit of a catch-22.
Okay. And when do you think the communication barrier between children and parents start emerging? And why do you think that happens?
I think, honestly, that probably starts in elementary school and certainly persists sometimes into middle school and high school. For a lot of people, particularly here in the States, our culture teaches, for the most part, Christianity, right? And in many religions, and including Christianity, sex is taboo. And discussing that type of topic means, oh, you're thinking about something that is sinful. And so most children in the United States have been going to church, children's church, Sunday school. So those ideas are planted as like seeds in them quite early, so that when they go to school and perhaps they're being introduced to new information about sex, and in school it's being discussed in a different way without the religion necessarily attached to it. Now there's some difficulty. How do I talk about this with my parents? Because they're the ones who are teaching me that sex is sinful, it's something that should not happen outside of marriage. But in school, I'm learning about it in a very kind of clinical, technical way. And how do I discuss this? So I think that's where the disconnect begins, because kids are hearing one thing at school and another thing at home and in their religious institutions.
Right. Okay. Do you think the generation gap between young people and parents do contribute to it as well?
Absolutely. I think so. Typically, in most cultures, our elders are considered the folks who are old and set in their ways, correct?
Yeah.
And then younger people are considered the ones who are more adaptable, and they're learning all of this new stuff. And so how do you bridge that gap? Because older generations feel they know what's best for their children, and younger people may challenge some of that, or say, well, mom, dad, or grandma, grandpa, what about this? Did you ever consider this new information? So yes, the generational gap, I think, does play a role. However, that can be bridged, I think, with respectful communication.
Right. Okay. And how can parents create an environment where their kids can feel safe enough to talk about their relationships and emotions and mental health?
Very simply, by stating it. I will
Sure.
talk a little bit about my upbringing. My father was
Mhm.
the one who actually created the safe environment for me. My mom didn't, not so much. So I'll tell you this story. When I was about 9 years old, my mom was in the kitchen chopping up some vegetables for dinner. And I said, Mom, what's a period? And her response was, it's the punctuation at the end of a sentence. Now, my mom knew what I was asking her, right? But she
Yeah.
did not want to deal with the question. And
Hmm.
I said, no, Mom, I mean with maxi pads and stuff. Because as a 9 year old, I had been in her bathroom and I saw her feminine products underneath the sink cabinet.
Yeah.
And my mom said, you're too young to know about that stuff. That was her response. And it made me feel afraid to approach her when I had questions about it. So I then went to my older brother. I have a much older brother. He
Hmm.
was college age. And so he did his best to explain it to me. He took out one of his science books and tried to explain it to me as best he could. But of course, he's a guy, so he's never experienced a menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I got that information from my brother. And then as I got older and the questions came up about sex, that experience with my mom at 9 years old was really seared into my brain. So the person I talked to, believe it or not, was my father. And one
Hmm.
of the things he said to me was, sweetheart, you can always come to me. Come talk to me when you have these questions. And so that's the simple way to do it. Even though it's uncomfortable, part of being an adult is having uncomfortable conversations. And since the
Hmm.
parents are the adults in the equation, they have to put it out there to their kids, come talk to me. I don't want you getting your information from the internet or from your little friends. Come to me, and you're safe coming to talk to me. That's how parents do it.
That's wonderful. That's actually nice. So mental health is generally a topic with a lot of stigma surrounding it.
Yes.
How do parents and their children normalize conversations about it?
I would say to begin treating mental health as though we would treat any other disease process, particularly now with the COVID pandemic, which has affected the entire world. I
Hmm.
think now is a wonderful time to open up these conversations even more because we see the effect that the pandemic has had on the mental health, not only of adults, but of young people as well. I know here in the States, we have seen an uptick in young people. We're talking about like high school students, for example, and sometimes even younger students, because of the pandemic, having more depression and more anxiety. I'm not sure
Hmm.
about in India, but here in the States, when we shut down the country, a lot of our students were not even going to school every day. They were being schooled at home and doing what we
Yeah.
call virtual learning.
Hmm.
And that was really problematic for a lot of students who did not learn well that way. And they feel as though they lost an entire year of learning. And so,
For
of
sure.
course, that added to their anxiety. So, within this context, I think it's better to open up these conversations by treating it the same way we would if we were speaking about cancer or heart disease or diabetes. In families, most people don't have a problem talking about diseases that their family members have. They'll know, for
Hmm.
example, a grandparent has diabetes, or
Yeah.
a parent has high blood pressure, or heart failure, something along those lines. We need to talk about mental health the same way and just say, hey, with heart disease, we know that it affects the heart, that particular part of the body. With mental health, it affects the mind and the emotions. And that's a part of our body as well. So that's the way to do it, to stop acting as though it's something that cannot be talked about. We can't avoid talking about it because we see the effects of it on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah. In India, at least for the design students, as a design student, we had the most toughest time trying to learn hands-on and get hands-on experience with our design tools virtually. And that put us in for a toss. We had an entire year of it, the virtual learning, and it did give us a bit of anxiety. How would we perform if we did go to college? Yeah. So what are the signs that working parents should look out for if their child has been feeling neglected? And how do they initiate the conversation?
In terms of signs, one thing would be a change in the child's attitude. So say, for example, you have a child that's normally extroverted. They are happy, they have a lot of friends, they enjoy participating in certain activities, and then you notice they're more withdrawn. They don't want to go to band practice or swimming practice, whatever sport they're participating in. They don't want to receive calls from their friends or don't want to receive company. Another thing is, believe it or not, change in hygiene. If you normally have a child that's very stylish, they pay attention to how their hair and makeup and outfits look, and now they go a day or two without taking a shower, not doing their hair, that's a sign that something is going wrong. And how do parents address this? By doing what I call a mental health check-in. And I say parents should do this at least a few times a week and just say to their kids, hey, how are you feeling? How are things going? Or listen, sweetheart, I noticed that you're not eating as much. You know, you're skipping meals, or normally you care so much about your hairstyles and you're not keeping yourself up. Tell me what's going on. And make time for those conversations, really asking, how are you feeling? And then as a parent, listen. I think so many young people want to have a voice and don't necessarily feel as though they can have that voice because the parents are the authority figures. And as an authority figure, if you're a leader, right, and the parents are the leaders in their homes, part of being a good leader is not only giving guidance and instruction to your children, the same way a platoon leader in the military would give guidance and instruction to his troops, but that also means listening, right? Because the parent, although they were once children, they're not living their children's experience. And so you need to be able to listen to what they're going through.
That's really well put. Thank you so much. So I have a question.
Sure.
How should parents take their children's dismissal to a conversation? Because I'm not a aware person that's always open for a conversation. So how should they usually take it, or what goes on in both parties?
Can you repeat the question? I wanted to make sure you said, how do parents take their children's dismissal?
Sort of. So the parent reaches out to their children, and to their child, and the child does not exactly want to have a conversation at all.
Sure.
So how do they go about that?
Just by saying, okay, if you don't want to talk right now, that's fine. Sweetheart, just know I'm here when you are ready to talk. And that way it leaves it open-ended. Because you're right, sometimes if a parent does a check-in and their child is maybe still processing how they're feeling, or they're just not ready to have the conversation with their parent yet, the parent can just say, okay, if you don't want to talk right now, that's fine, but at some point you do need to talk, right? I recognize that you're going through something right now, you're not yourself, but you can come to me because I have your back. And when you're ready, let me know.
Right. Simple assurance, yeah.